Sky 5394 North approach, Roger, verify you have information Lima at Reno and expect runway 17 left.
We have information Lima and we'll expect 17 left, and just so you know, we're going direct Haley.
Sky 5394 Roger, do you want the RNAV X-ray approach from Haley?
Yes, please.
Hello again everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are going to be taking a look at the next installment in the Black Square Steam Gauge Overhaul series, and that is of course the analog Beechcraft A36 Bonanza. I'm sure that at this point many of you are already familiar with the Black Square Steam Gauge Overhaul series. For those who aren't though, the series essentially aims to overhaul a number of the default aircraft in the sim. Fundamentally, the Steam Gauge Overhaul series upgrades the aircraft systems and of course gives us mechanical gauges within the cockpit. But you'll notice as well throughout the video the aircraft has also been significantly improved in a number of areas, including sounds, flight model. There are multiple avionics options available, as well as 80+ random or scheduled failures. Other nice details, we also get advanced engine modelling, including spark plug fouling, vapour lock, flooding and backfires. So really, other than the external model of the aircraft, which remains unchanged from the default, as you'll see throughout the flight, the Black Square Analog King Air, really a whole new aircraft in most respects. Just Flight have been kind enough here to let us take an early access look at the product, so as always do bear in mind that could mean that there will be improvements and changes to the aircraft ahead of release. That being said, the A36 was in a very nice state when I came to fly it, and hopefully I think what you'll see here in today's video will be very representative of the final product. I've got what I hope will be another very interesting flight lined up for you today. We're currently on the ground at Reno's Stead airport. We're going to be taking the aircraft back home towards Lake Tahoe. Some of you may remember that we flew the same route in reverse using the Coronado Bonanza, and I thought it'd be interesting to run the same route again to compare the more modern version of the aircraft. Unfortunately, the weather hasn't been quite so kind to us here today, but it is of course going to give us the perfect opportunity to test out the A36's IFR capabilities. So as usual, we're going to be carrying out a full flight in the aircraft, all the way through from a cold and dark start right through to shutdown. Hopefully that will give you a good opportunity to see the level of depth that's been modelled into the A36. We're going to be flying the LDA approach as well onto runway 18 at Lake Tahoe, something rather unusual, so hopefully you'll enjoy that. And then at the end, as always, whilst this video isn't strictly a review since we are taking an early access look at the product, I'll give you my thoughts on the Black Square Analog Bonanza. As always, ladies and gents, I do hope you enjoyed the video. Again, I think it should make for quite an interesting flight with the IFR conditions, and hopefully you'll pick up a few tips and tricks along the way. If you do enjoy the content, then please consider giving the video a like, and if you've yet to do so, then please consider subscribing to the channel as well. Once again, we'll run things right through from a cold and dark start, so let's head for the cockpit of the A36 and we'll begin running through that process. So here we are then in the cockpit of the Black Square Analog A36 Bonanza. As you can see, a fairly gloomy day here on the ground in Reno, definitely IFR conditions en route. Potentially as well we might pick up some icing conditions as we go. Technically the Bonanza are not certified for icing conditions, but I think it'll make the flight pretty interesting, particularly for the approach and towards Lake Tahoe later on. So we're going to press on for now. As usual, we've already carried out the walk around. Running through our before start checks then, the passenger safety briefing, not required. Seats are positioned for takeoff, rudder pedals have been adjusted, seatbelts and shoulder harnesses are secure. The landing gear handle is selected down, cowl flaps are selected open. Avionics circuit breakers are checked, and as always with a Black Square product it is worth checking. Circuit breakers can be pulled, and there are random failures modelled on the aircraft, so the circuit breakers can also be tripped. Alternate static source is set to normal. Left side circuit breakers are once again checked in. Fuel selector will start on the left, and in terms of the fuel quantities, expecting to see around 20 US gallons in each main tank, and we've got about 7 gallons in each tip tank there, just to check the functionality of those later on. The battery, alternator and standby alternator can go on. With the annunciators, just the gyro warning light for now, expecting to see that. And carrying out a test. The light functionality there looks good. Avionics master is selected off for the start. The beacon and the nav lights can go on. For the landing gear indications, we do have gear down 3 greens, bus voltage is checked. And for the fuel quantity indications, as we suggested, About 20 air scans there in each main tank and about 7 in each of the tip tanks. For the start itself, it's definitely going to be a cold start. You can see it's about -2 degrees outside air temperature currently. So prop can go through to fully forward, mixture can go through to fully rich. Throttle is set fully open. We'll prime the engine. So initially coming through to the low position on the auxiliary pump, just checking the functionality there. And through to high, just waiting so we see a peak in fuel flow, which we now have. So the engine is primed. We'll close the throttle. And just leaving that about half an inch open for the start. The engine is modelled quite nicely on the Bonanza. We'll talk more about that as we go, but certainly do have to be pretty accurate with your start procedures to get the engine to catch. Anyway, as always, just checking no one in the vicinity of the prop. We just got the ground crew out there on the left. We'll give him a shout. Clear prop. And closing up that DV window once again. Coming down to the mags. And cranking through to the start position. So the engine catching, start warning light is out. Oil pressure has come up, so feeding in the throttle up to 1000 RPM. We do have a good start, so running through the after start checks. The bus voltage looks good, alternator load is checked. Oil pressure, we're looking for at least 10 psi within 30 seconds. You can see we're well within the green band there now. So leaving the engine idling between 1000 and 1200 RPM. Mixture, we will actually just lean out here slightly on the ground as we're up at around 5,000 feet currently. And again, the engine is modelled quite accurately, so you will get, for example, spark plug fouling. So mixture is set, annunciators are checked. Instrument air pressure is checked. And the Avionics master can go on. Just waiting here for the TDS Garmin GTN-XI to initialise. We don't need the secondary GPS here today, so we'll turn that off.
TOS system test OK.
And for the transponder for now, we'll go into standby. There are a couple of things that don't state save currently on the aircraft, which would be nice. For example, the transponder being one of them. So the GTN-XI has initialised. We'll get the weather here first, so just going to flight plan. And Reno. That's actually going to give us the real world conditions currently. That's not of much use to us, but we'll set the altimeter.
Central Aircraft Information, Lima is current at Reno, wind 210 at 18, gust 27.
We have QNH of around 3025, and that's set on both sides, giving us an aerodrome elevation of around 5,040 feet, which does concur with the aerodrome elevation. So altimeters are set. For the GTN-XI, we'll set up the flight plan. Pretty straightforward for us today. We're going to be departing out of Reno towards the Squaw Valley VOR, which is Sierra Whiskey Romeo, Squaw Valley. And then on towards Lake Tahoe, which is Kilo Tango Victor Lima. Just going back on that.
Flight 148, did you hear the pirate from the last arrival as I was talking to him?
There we have Reno out towards Squaw Valley and then Lake Tahoe. For the VOR itself, frequency 113.2, so we'll tune that up. And we can just transfer that straight across. Coming back to the map page, track out towards Squaw Valley is 199, we'll set that on the HSI. And you can see they're already picking up the Squaw Valley DME, showing 34.2 miles towards the VOR. And if you look there in the top right of the GTN-XI, we already have the VOR visually identified Sierra Whiskey Romeo. It says 200 and 199 there on the HSI. We'll set the heading bug runway heading. We're going to be departing off runway 32. So GPS is set, autopilot. We're going to be climbing up to 12,000 feet initially. So 12,000 pre-selected, and we'll pre-select a vertical speed of 700 as well for the climb. We can arm that up later on. The lights, once again, got the beacon and the nav lights on. We'll take the taxi light on as well in preparation for the taxi. And it's a little bit gloomy outside, so we'll take the panel lighting on there as well, which you can see has been done very nicely. And for what it's worth, there's the panel flood, which gives you that very characteristic Beechcraft blue hue. We'll just go with the panel lights for now. So lights are set, cabin heat. We've got the defrost on currently, we can probably take that off again for now, that was from a previous flight. We'll leave the aft cabin air on, and for the cabin heat, you can see that'll just bring up the cabin temperature, which is also modelled. You do have to manage the heating and cooling of the cabin as you go. Again, a really nice feature, we'll leave that as is for now, we'll keep an eye on the temperature. So cabin heat is set, circuit breakers, once again, just checking none of those have popped during the start. And for the oil temperature, we're looking for at least 24 degrees here before we commence the taxi. We're up at around 60 now, so we're good there for the taxi in terms of the oil temp. So we'll assume we have been cleared for the taxi. Again, we're going to be departing off runway 32, so it'll be a nice short taxi for us. Not a whole lot of wind around today, but we'll get ourselves pointed into the direction of runway 32 for the run-up. So park brake can come off. And just swing ourselves out to the right here. Make sure we clear our ground crew.
Challenger 772 Juliet Sierra Reno Tower traffic full out is 5 mile final, wind 190 at 18, gust 24, runway 17 left, cleared for takeoff.
So we'll just taxi straight ahead, joining onto the main taxiway. And that'll take us out for the thresholds of runway 32 and 26. No traffic coming down the main taxiway itself. And looking at the windsock there, looks like the wind is more or less out from the east actually, what little there is of it, so we'll just carry out the run-up at the holding point for runway 32. I'll keep things nice and easy. So just gently coming onto the brakes, we'll bring the aircraft to a stop at the holding points. And once again, park brake is set, coming up on the throttle to maintain 1000 RPM. For the run-up itself, just checking those temperatures and pressures, everything looking good, so coming now through to 1700 RPM.
Challenger 772 Juliet Sierra, contact NorCal departure, see ya. Morning departure, 2 Juliet Sierra, have a good day.
So there's 1700, checking the mags first. First onto the left. We've got about 120 RPM drop there on the left, which is within limits. We're looking for a maximum of 150. Going back to both again on the mags. And again, all of these sorts of things are modelled on the aircraft. There are multiple failure options, I believe, as well. For example, magneto failure could present itself, so it is worth carrying out the run-up. You can see they were actually a touch low, down to around 1500 RPM. It's almost a 200 RPM drop there on the right-hand mag. So potentially a little bit of an issue there. We'll just wait until we see what the peak RPM is again. Okay, so peaking back at around 1650, so still just within limits there. And obviously for the sake of the video today, we're going to take the aircraft into the air. If we get unlucky, we might have a failure to deal with en route. So back up to 1700, we'll cycle the prop.
Afternoon NorCal departure, or morning, NorCal departure 772 Juliet Sierra 6000, climbing via the Stead 190.
November 772 Juliet Sierra, NorCal departure, good morning, radar contact, expect moderate turbulence through 9000.
Okay, thanks.
So good check there on the prop. Instrument air pressure, once again, is checked. And gently now coming back to idle on the throttle.
November 2 Juliet Sierra, traffic is about 8 miles ahead of you. They're going to continue southbound for a little bit, but they're reporting nothing more than light chop so far.
Okay, thanks.
Out of 10,500.
And idling there around 600, 650 RPM. So the run-up complete, coming back up to 1000 RPM. Running through the rest of our checks, the autopilot once again is set 12,000 feet for the climb, 700 feet vertical speed pre-selected, and as I say, we'll arm that up in the climb. The GTNXI has been initialized, the flight plan has been entered. The transponder, we've got 1200, and we'll come on to out. For the engine instruments, they're checked, annunciator lights are checked, flight instruments, showing about 085 there on the HSI, compass agrees, we've got 199 there on the HSI bar, heading bug is set, and the altimeters, they're showing around 5,040 feet. HSI once again is set, the fuel will come over to the right tank now. And again, just checking those fuel quantities. Everything looking good. Pitot heat will definitely take on. Potential for some icing here. Again, we're going to try and avoid any icing conditions as best we can. The aircraft not certified for it. And you can see that cabin temp now up around 22 degrees, so hopefully it will plateau there. If not, we'll just have to reduce the cabin heating a little. So Pitot heat is on, prop de-ice not required. Flight controls. Got full left. Full right. On the ailerons and on the tail, full up. And full down, and on the rudder, full left. And full right, so the flight controls are full and free. Electric pitch trim is checked, and we'll set that for the takeoff. I find around 3 units up is about right for the takeoff. I don't know whether or not that does concur with the green band. I would assume the green band is the takeoff band. So go with about 2 units up, otherwise I find the aircraft is a little bit nose heavy. So trim is set, flaps, we'll check the operation of the flaps. We'll just come straight through to the down position here. And visually confirming there, we do have the down indication light. Flaps look good. Back through to the approach setting. And once again, visually checking the flaps. It's going to be a flaps up takeoff, so we'll come back into the up position. And again, just visually confirming the flaps are up. Once again, seatbelts are secure, shoulder harness is secure, doors and windows. Again, one of the quote-unquote weaker areas of the Black Square products, no functioning door on the aircraft. That's as a limitation of using the default sim model, but the door is closed and locked, DV window is closed. Passenger writing desk is stowed. And the final items here before the takeoff, we'll get the landing lights on. Taxi light can come off, strobe lights are on, transponder set to out, air conditioning is set off. And for the mixture, we'll just come slightly forward here, but we'll stay aft of fully rich since we are up at around 5,000 feet. Annunciators are checked. Visually, we look to be clear of any traffic coming down final. So part brake off, we'll get ourselves lined up here on runway 32.
Flight 148, taxi to the ramp via Charlie and just monitor ground 121.9er.
Alright, clear to Salmon via direct Boise up to 190, expect 370 Yellowstone 7.
77, read that correct. So far, most of the departures and arrivals into Reno, just importing right light shop. How's the ride out of Carson City?
Okay, so we're nicely lined up here now on runway 32. Looks as though we've got a bit of a break in the weather ahead of us as well, so we should be able to maintain visually clear with the terrain, at least till we're up through 10,000 feet. So part brake can come off. With that turbocharger, we should be able to maintain 30 inches on the manifold pressure, even up at 5,000 feet. So just feeding in the throttle. Okay, power is checked, temperatures and pressures looking good. Aircraft just wanting to pull out to the right. Up through 80 knots, so easing back on the yoke. And we're airborne. We'll just leave the gear down until we're clear of the runway, in case we need to land back straight ahead in a bit of a hurry. And we are now clear, so tapping the brakes, bringing the gear up. We're going to carry out a max performance climb initially, so we'll keep full power, full RPM, and pitching for 100 knots. Again, just till we're up through 10,000 feet, making sure we are clear of the terrain as quickly as possible. Needing just a little bit of right rudder here to centre up that ball, again with a fairly high power setting. So trimming for 100 knots, the gear is up, the flaps are up.
Yellowstone 7, contact open center, 128.8, have a good day.
28.8, Yellowstone 7, good day.
Overall on the takeoff, the aircraft felt reasonable. Definitely you can still feel the DNA there of the default Bonanza. A little bit squirrely on the rudder, but not too bad. And fairly heavy in rotation, as I say. Even with that little bit of aft trim in.
240.
Climbing 240, 772 Jules here.
So just coming up through 7,000 feet. And again, just about visually clear with the terrain. We're going to be coming into the cloud fairly shortly though. Getting pretty hot now in the cabin as well, 29 degrees. We'll deal with that once we've got the aircraft leveled off. Still looking good on the speed. The aircraft is pretty straightforward hand fly, a little bit of a left wing down tendency. We can trim that out as well later on, once we've set cruise power. There's 8,000, so another 2,000 in the climb. Still visual with the terrain. We'll actually just come out slightly to the left here to bring ourselves away from this bank of cloud, try and maintain visual conditions as best we can. And of course that's also going to have us turning onto our flight plan route a little bit sooner. With that in mind, we can centre up the heading bug for our planned turn. There's 9,000 foot now on the altitude.
Skywest 5014, contact open center, 132.05.
Come on to heading of about 160. That should bring us back towards our flight plan course. Obviously we're slightly out to the right of that currently. And happy to make the turn now. You can see we are heading away from the high terrain, heading out towards the southwest. Just coming up through 10,000, so we can come back towards the cruise climb now. We'll go for 25 inches manifold pressure. Start increasing that speed. And there's 2,500 RPM. We'll pitch now for around 120 knots. And as we discussed, we'll arm up the altitude. We'll capture in just a moment. There's the flight director coming to heading there as well.
November Golf North departure radar contact. Departure out of Carson City a moment ago reported. Still just light chop throughout our airspace, and most of the departures out of Reno reporting the same light chop.
That sounds right. I would start picking it up almost immediately.
Okay, so trimmed pretty nicely on the heading bug. We'll get the autopilot in. So we have flight director heading, out-armed, autopilot. And again, 700 feet per minute rate of climb pre-selected. That seems to be doing a pretty nice job there on the speed. The cruise climb checks, we've got the prop set at 2,500 RPM, throttle, we'll leave it 25 inches for now, there's 1,000 to go. Mixture, we'll just continue to lean out here, but we'll lean that out properly once we're in the cruise. Airspeed looks good, autopilot is engaged, engine temperatures and pressures are checked, cowl flaps will leave open for now. Auxiliary fuel pump is off. That's the cruise climb checklist complete. That cabin temperature looking pretty good now actually as we continue to climb here up into the cooler air. So you can see, again, very nicely modelled overall. Just coming slightly on the range here as well. You can see we're heading back towards our flight plan course. And showing about 32 miles here to run towards Squaw Valley. Definitely the potential for some icing currently, so we'll take the prop de-ice on here as well. Pitot heat is on. As I think we discussed on the ground, the Bonanza not certified to fly into known icing conditions. Currently looking at the airframe, looks as though we're clear, but definitely some potential for icing. As I say, we're really going to push the boundaries a little bit for today's flight, just for the sake of interest. So just approaching 12,000, the autopilot here doing a very nice job so far of levelling the aircraft off. And having flown the Bonanza a little bit at this point, so far the autopilot seems to fly the aircraft very nicely, it's very capable.
Skywest 5394, clear tally.
So there's 12,000 feet, we do have out capture. Back to our cruise power setting, we're looking for 22 inches on the manifold pressure.
5394 to set and maintain 16,000.
And 2,300 RPM. We can lean out as well the mixture at this point. We'll get the cowl flaps closed up as well. You can see we do have a little computer showing EGT, also we can use that for the leaning function. Also shows engine horsepower output, which is quite nice. So we'll just lean the mixture here until we see peak HP. Looks like we're pretty much bang on as it was. So we'll just keep coming through, richening the mixture slightly here until we see... There you go, we've got lean established, but we'll just come slightly forward of that. We'll go rich of peak horsepower output.
7 Juliet Sierra, climb and maintain flight level 290. Climbing 290, 772 Juliet Sierra.
So it looks like 184 is more or less our peak horsepower. So as I say, just richening the mixture slightly there, showing 182. 23 degrees, just ever so slightly too warm still. we'll just take off a notch there of the cabin heat. And we are now nicely established in the cruise, running through the level off and cruise checks. Cowl flaps are closed, power is set, auxiliary fuel pump is off, lights, we can take the landing lights off here as well. Actually, we'll leave those on, we're going to be descending again in just a moment's time. The fuel, still showing reasonably balanced here, just coming up on the amber arc there on the left tank. We'll switch over to the right again. And whilst we're talking about fuel as well, we'll get those tip tanks on. Again, just to demonstrate the functionality there, they'll drain down into the main tanks. So noting the time there as well for the fuel change, 1719 Zulu. Looks as well like we're just coming into a bit of a break here in the clouds. Really beautiful scenery. 12,000 feet is going to keep us just above the terrain for our flight today. It's a little bit lower than would be ideal, but we've gone with that partly to save a little bit of time here in the climb. We'll discuss that more during the approach. But again, really nice route, hopefully as well a really great demonstration of the capabilities of the A36.
Kilo Delta radar contact 7 miles southeast of the Minden Airport, Minden altimeter 2966 altitude.
2160.
Ground 5394 NorCal approach, try to verify you have information Lima at Reno and expect runway 17 left.
We have information Lima and we'll expect 17 left, and just so you know, we're going direct Haley.
Ground 5394, roger, do you want the RNAV X-ray approach from Haley?
Yes, please.
So as you can see, we just come onto our flight plan track and we're now in nav here on the autopilot. We'll let the autopilot fly us in towards the Squaw Valley VOR. We'll be commencing a turn, actually joining onto the approach inbound towards Lake Tahoe from the VOR itself, so not tracking direct towards the field. And we'll be making that turn around 2.5 miles. Just going for our ground speed there, 1% of that's going to be around 1.8 miles, but it's actually going to be over a 90-degree turn, so about 2.5 miles should work out quite nicely. We'll start getting the aircraft set up then for the approach. So we'll go to Lake Tahoe, and low procedure, we want an approach. It's going to be the LDA, which is a localizer directional approach. Essentially the meaning there is that the localizer doesn't actually take us directly onto runway course, it's slightly offset. Again, we'll discuss that as we go. So we can load and activate that. So for now, we'll just come back into heading. Want to keep tracking inbound towards Squaw Valley. We'll just come into nav for the time being, just to give us the CDI bar reference. And showing about 10 miles to run now. The approach itself, you can see that's actually going to take us over Squaw Valley and then inbound towards the field. The chart just popping into view there as well. So we'll brief the approach for the chart itself. It's going to be based off the localizer frequency of 108.9. We've got that tuned up on the standby. The approach course is going to be 171 degrees, and we'll have to tune that up later on. Aerodrome elevation 6,200, 6,300 feet. And we'll be flying the approach down to an MDA of 7,200. That's a DH of 901 feet. So we'll just set that here on the rad out. We'll call it 1,000 here just to be a little bit more conservative. It's a bit tricky to accurately set the decision bug there on the rad out, so there's 1,000. In terms of the weather conditions, we need a 900-foot cloud base and 5 statute miles. I believe that is a visibility. I'm not all that familiar with the US charts, but we do have those weather conditions actually considerably better than that here today. Again, landing on runway 18, vacating off to the left. And for the missed approach, you can see here on the chart now, just coming inbound towards Squaw Valley. So missed approach is a climbing right turn up to 11,000 feet, heading of 329, taking us towards the Squaw Valley VOR. And once we hit the VOR itself, taking up the hold, it's going to be inbound 038, left-hand hold. The MSA for the arrival, 12,000 feet, we're going to be flying based off the MSA here. The actual vertical profile initially has us coming at 12,400, but as I said, we're leveled up to 12,000 here today, just for the sake of reducing the climb. And again, that will keep us clear of terrain based on looking at some other charts earlier on. So showing 4.6 miles, another 2 miles here before we commence the turn. Going to be tracking outbound on the 059 radial, so we can set that now ahead of time.
Scout 5394, turn 10 degrees left, set to vector out a little bit more to the west, and then send you direct heli for the approach.
And once we've got the aircraft turned inbound, we'll discuss our vertical profile and a little bit more about our navigation. We're going to try out the RNAV here as well. That'll be fairly interesting. We've yet to try that on a Black Square product. The RNAV unit just down below the GPS. But for now, just keeping an eye on our DME, waiting until we see that 2.5.
Scout 5394, if I didn't say it, set to maintain 11000, expect light chop, landing Reno.
110, expect light chop.
So there's 2.5, commencing the turn out to the left.
Lattice 7, November Golf, safe flight conditions.
Light chop and visibility is about 10 and sky obscured above, sorry, probably about 12,000.
And again, just double checking, so we've got 059 set, coming onto the heading. You can see the aircraft just about to intercept outbound. So in terms of the vertical profile, in the RNAV unit we've actually got the waypoint here, the initial fix just before we come onto the Loke. That's already pre-selected. We've got 113.2 for the score value VOR, the 059 radial outbound, and 16.2 miles. You can see if we switch over there to RNAV on the DME, that's already giving us information in reference to that, so showing 14.2 miles to run. So once we come onto the radio here, we might just try briefly tracking outbound in RNAV, just for the sake of checking out the functionality. As I say, in terms of that vertical profile then, so 12,000 feet for now. Once we hit 20.4 DME on the localizer, we can descend down to 10,200. We'll have to get the aircraft down fairly sharply there to make the 10,200 foot height, and then we'll continue the 3-degree profile thereafter. Currently doing around 180 knots over the ground, so it's going to be about 900 feet per minute rate of descent initially. We've obviously got the check heights there on the way down, and again down to the MDA of 7,200 feet. So nicely established now on that radial. We'll just switch over to RNAV navigation, just briefly, just to test out the functionality there. So you can see showing 12 miles an hour to run, and slightly out to the right of course, but pretty much that turn worked out quite nicely. Looks as though we are just tracking back onto the course there as well. For the time being though, we'll leave the score value VOR tuned up, and we'll leave the localizer there in standby. Again, the LDA approach, the reason it's an LDA as opposed to a localizer approach, you can see there that the course itself, 171, is actually somewhat offset from the runway heading, runway 18. That's primarily here probably due to terrain concerns. You can see the localizer there would actually take us over the high terrain. Anyway, in terms of those tip tanks, looks like they've pretty much drained down now. Those lights should go out once they're empty. And you can see that's brought our fuel tanks back up to just above 20 US gallons there in each main tank. As they pretty much drain, we'll get those off for now. Cabin temp looking nice, and showing about 10 miles to run now before we make the turn. Again, with our ground speed being around 180 knots, that's going to be more than a 90-degree turn. We'll go with about 2.5 miles again to make that turn. That seemed to work out pretty nicely.
Lattice 7, November Golf, thank you for the report. Squawk DFR, change the device for Super Route, today.
1200, switches 7, November Golf.
Anyway, in terms of the approach checks, the altimeters are set, cowl flaps are closed, power is set as required, engine temperatures and pressures are checked, fuel quantities we've already discussed, fuel quantities look good and we've got plenty there for the go around. And for the flaps and landing gear, we'll hold those for now. We'll take the landing gear before we commence the descent onto our 3-degree slope, just to help keep the speed in check and start reducing that speed. We can reduce our vertical speed then as well for the 3-degree profile. That allows us as well, we can take the approach flaps on the way down. We'll hold off on the landing flaps till we're visual with the runway. Anyway, for now that's the approach checklist complete. We'll just continue here, another 4 miles here until we make the turn onto the LDA.
Direct heli from here and descend to 10,000, was it, for Sky 5394?
Sky 5394, affirmative, proceed direct heli, cross heli at or above 10,000, cleared RNAV X-ray, runway 17 left approach.
Cross heli at above 10,000, clear out of X-ray, 17 left, Sky 5394.
2409 contact, NorCal departure, see ya.
That was 2409.
So we're just coming up on 3.5 miles to run, another mile here till we make the turn. We've also now tuned up India Tango Victor Lima, that's the localizer inbound towards Lake Tahoe. We'll leave the course bar for now, just until we made the turn. We'll use the heading bug first to get the aircraft around the turn, and then we'll switch out the CDI bar as well. So that's 2.5 miles, 171 on the course.
Traffic, click up here. 2 Juliet, 2 to the Phillips, westbound on the South Shore line. That is south, 200 Tahoe.
And bearing in mind, at the moment, the CDI is still
Vertical track.
slave to the RNAV. There's 171. We'll bring the heading bug around to a line. And we'll come back to nav here on the HSI. Looks like the turn just a tiny bit early there. So we're just going to have to wait here until we come onto the CDI bar before we commence the descent. And everything looking good there now. So descending down to 10,200 feet. As discussed, we'll take the gear down. Just help bring that speed back. And initially we'll go with around 700 feet per minute rate of descent. Just bring the speed back as well into the white arc so that we can take the flaps as we wish. We'll go for around 120 knots for now here in the descent. And you can see there that localized bar just fluctuating slightly. I gather that Black Square have actually accurately modelled nav aid interruption, and certainly you can see that the needle behaving slightly more realistically there. We were broadly on the scale there for now, but we'll just have to regain the loc here by coming out to the left of our course. Showing 17 miles to run. And again, 12.4 miles we can continue our descent. So good now on the speed, just increasing that power slightly to give us 120 knots. We do have 3 greens on the gear. We'll just periodically increase our mixture there as well. Though we're not going to go back to fully rich since we're going to be landing at around 6,300 feet. There's 1,000 to go. Once we're back on that localizer bar, we can come back into nav and let the aircraft track the loc for us. Once again, the TGS G10XI, which doesn't come with the aircraft to be clear, but it's a very nice piece of kit, particularly for flying in the States. All of the United States charts included. And you can see great for situational awareness here. There's nav. Once the aircraft's tracking straight down the loc, we'll center up the heading bug again. And about another 2 miles to run here before we can continue the descent. With that speed back at 120 knots now, should need around 600 feet per minute to maintain the 3-degree slope. And again, we're going to be going down to our MDA of 7,200 feet. So the aircraft just capturing the out, but again, we've just got another 0.4 of a mile here before we can continue the descent. We'll set 7,200 here a little bit preemptively. And once again, we can arm that 700 feet per minute now. Just reduce that to 600 as discussed. Nicely tracking the loc. And 12 miles, slightly high here on the profile. 9.3, we're looking for 9,500 feet. Just increase that vertical speed again to make sure we do get back onto profile. Down through 10,000, landing lights are on. Again, just increasing that mixture as we go. Engine temperatures and pressures all looking good, speed's checked. And just coming through 10 miles, so we'll go to approach flaps. Potentially a little bit early there on the flaps, but it's nice to get everything done ahead of time on an approach like this. So flaps are set to approach. And 9.5 miles, again 9,500 feet.
No traffic, look up there, 2 Juliet Juliet is going to be sidestepping 18 direct to the ramp tunnel.
So just a touch low now, we'll reduce that vertical speed. Looking pretty good there, 9.5, just below 9,500. 7.4 is 8,800. We'll start keeping a good lookout now as well for the ground. Already visual with the ground itself, but not quite visual with Tahoe yet. So far everything looking pretty good on the approach, still happy there with the speed. And 7.4 DME is what we're looking for next. Again, 8,800 feet. Start keeping a good lookout for the field as well. Looks like the Radout's alive, just coming through 2,500. Ever so slightly out to the right of course, we'll keep a good eye on that. Looks like the aircraft is correcting. And just coming through 9,000, so another 200 feet here for our next altitude check.
West, copy.
Go for the mountain.
So 7.4, 100 feet high. Increase that vertical speed once again. The missed approach point itself, that's 4 miles from the runway, so we've got another 3 miles here for the missed approach point. And again, the MDA 7,200. Pretty happy though that we are visual now, not quite able to identify the runway just yet.
Can I get 8 aside into Juliet and Shutdown, please?
Okay, we do have Tahoe now visually identified, just off our 1 o'clock. Probably a little bit tricky to make out in the video.
Copy that. 8 aside into Julie, totaling 16.
We'll keep the autopilot in for now. We'll just let the autopilot fly us down to the MDA. The approach checks, landing light is on, fuel tanks, just stay on the right, the tanks are pretty evenly balanced. Flaps are set to approach, airspeed is good, trim is set, shoulder harnesses are secure, seatbacks are set for landing. That's the approach checklist complete. Just coming up on 1,000 to go. Another mile here till we hit the missed approach point, just down through 2,000 feet there on the Radout. And again at this point, nicely visual with the runway. So overall the LDA approach worked out quite nicely there. We'll start reducing our power, let that speed start to roll off.
Hotel RV 111 Hotel.
There's 20 inches on the manifold pressure. Just coming up on the missed approach point. We don't need the missed approach, so we'll pause that for the time being. And as we've reached the missed approach point now, we'll take out the autopilot. Keep reducing that power. Just going to hold the approach flaps for now. I find that the landing flap in the Bonanza is pretty draggy. So we'll just hold approach flap and 100 knots. Still got that left wing down tendency there, didn't trim that out during the cruise. Anyway, for the finals checks pitch, is full fine, undercarriage is down, flaps to come. The landing clearance not required, the runway is visually clear. And looks like at the moment we've got 2 reds, 2 whites there on the PAPI, so nicely on profile. You can see there in that particular case the localizer not too far offset from the runway course itself, but certainly some LDA approaches can be fairly significantly offset. We'll get rid of the flight director there as well, we don't need that any longer. So good on the speed, we'll take flaps 3 to landing. And again, looking good on the profile in terms of the PAPIs, 2 reds, 2 whites. With
500.
With those flaps, definitely feeling that drag. Let's check to 500, we'll keep the speed at around 90 knots for now. Certainly needing a lot more power to do that with that extra drag. And again, we're going to be vacating off to the right. We'll try and land pretty much on the touchdown zone. There's no need to land short, we've got plenty of runway. A little bit low there on the PAPIs, correcting for that, although I'm pretty happy with where we are visually currently. And just letting that speed roll off towards 80 knots. Coming off the throttle. Just holding the Bonanza off. There's touchdown. And the runway exit lights just off head of the aircraft, again vacating off to the right. The brakes feel pretty good on the Bonanza, they're not by any means overly sensitive. Braking rate feels reasonable. Just starting to increase that braking strength now as we approach the exit. And as we said, vacating off to the right. So we'll just wait until we've got here clear of the runway and then we can carry out the after-landing checks. No traffic coming down the main taxiway, and all clear on the left. We'll taxi straight across here, we'll go and park up just off our 11 o'clock position. Got the main terminal building ahead of us, BizJet there parked currently. And we'll get the aircraft nice and slow, the flaps can come up. Landing light can go off, taxi light is on. Take the strobes as well, prop de-ice and pitot heat off. Just get ourselves straightened up here and then we can open up the cowl flaps. So cowl flaps are open, temperatures and pressures looking pretty good. The trim, we'll return that back to the neutral position. And again, landing light is off, transponder is off. We'll leave the mixture as is again since we're fairly high aerodrome elevation here. Now we'll just swing the aircraft around. Just keeping an eye there on our right wingtip, a little bit close to the building. Just needing a bit of power here as well to keep the aircraft moving around the turn. Okay, so nicely straightened up. Beautiful view there of the hills as we shut down. We'll get the park brake on once again. And as usual, leaving the engine idling around 1000 RPM. For the shutdown checks, the park brake is set. Electrical equipment. Just do a quick run around there, making sure everything's off. And everything looking good. Just get the panel lights off there as well and the taxi lights. So electrical equipment is off. Avionics. The Avionics master is off. Close the throttle. And we can bring the mixture back to the idle cutoff position. Good shutdown there on the engine. Does look like we picked up a little bit of icing there during the cruise. Quite interesting. Anyway, good rundown. We'll get the mags off. Standby alternator, and battery switches are off. And that's our shutdown checklist complete. So there you go guys, I do hope you enjoyed our look at the Black Square Analog A36 Bonanza. Undoubtedly another very nice effort from Black Square and another excellent overhaul of one of the default aircraft within the sim. Again, this video is a preview of an early access product, so you can expect a few things to change potentially between now and release. But even in its current state, the Bonanza is a very nice product, a very capable aircraft, and I think another great addition to the sim. Hopefully the flight there gave you a pretty good idea as to what the product is capable of, but we'll just touch briefly on some of the additions here, the upgrades that we may not have seen throughout the video. Obviously with the Steam Gauge Overhaul series, it tends to be the aircraft gauges as well as the aircraft systems that really get the majority of the attention from Black Square. Nevertheless, the product also boasts a whole host of improvements and features in other areas. For example, as you'll probably have noticed here, we do get multiple variants of the aircraft. So firstly we have the turbocharged A36 with the tip tanks, that's the aircraft we flew here today. We also have the normally aspirated A36, both with the tip tanks and without. There are multiple avionics options and configurations available, those can be changed on the fly, and the aircraft currently supports the TDS GTN-XI, the PMS GTN-750, as well as working title GNS-530 integration. Another aspect of the Black Square product that I really enjoy personally, the aircraft comes with 80 plus random or scheduled failures. Those can be based on a mean time between failure, and again they can also be programmed by the user. The Analog King Air also purportedly boasts the most advanced turbocharger simulation available within Microsoft Flight Simulator. That one actually caught me out during the flight. You'll notice that we were adjusting the mixture throughout the flight. Not really necessary at all there, as we were actually below the critical altitude of our turbocharger throughout the flight itself. Engine modelling on the aircraft has also been significantly improved. The A36, for example, does model spark plug fouling, vapour lock, you can flood the engine, also induce backfires. We touched very briefly as well on the mathematically accurate VOR and ADF signal attenuation and noise degradation, as well as the simulated environmental control system and the JPI EDM 800 computer. State saving is also included on the aircraft, although as we discussed it's a little bit hit and miss. There are certain things that save, certain things that don't. Black Square though have previously upgraded both the Caravan and the King Air pretty significantly, so I suspect we'll see more features come online with the Bonanza in due course. The flight model of the A36 has also received some improvements, although they are less significant than the rest of the aircraft in terms of its overhaul. And the same goes with the aircraft sounds. Whilst the Black Square Bonanza does make use of the default Microsoft Flight Simulator Bonanza engine sounds, you'll notice as well that there's been a significant number of custom sounds added to the aircraft, which really goes to enhance the overall sound pack and certainly makes the Bonanza feel that much more immersive. It probably is worth pointing out once again that, as with the other Black Square products, you do still get the same limitations here with the Bonanza that we've seen previously. Given that the aircraft does make use of the default A36 external model, that means no opening doors on the aircraft, which is a bit of a shame as always at this sort of price point. Apparently though, that is a fundamental limitation. There's nothing that Black Square unfortunately can do about that. It would be nice as well to have some external fixtures and fittings, but I presume that they would fall under the same limitation. Otherwise though, I really enjoyed our outing in the Analog Bonanza. The aircraft is shaping up very nicely indeed, and certainly looking to be on a par with both the King Air and the Caravan. Worth noting as well that the Black Square Analog Baron shouldn't be too far around the corner. That's quite exciting, an aircraft I'm certainly looking forward to. And for those of you who are excited about the Baron and perhaps considering the A36 as well, if you do purchase the Analog Bonanza, you'll be entitled to a 25% discount off the Baron when it releases. Anyway, once again, I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me as well, you can leave those down in the comment section below. A very big thank you to Just Flight for letting us take an early access look at the Black Square Bonanza. And as always, a huge thank you as well to my channel members and patrons for all of your support. I do hope that all of you are having a great day wherever you are. Take really good care, and I will see you all again soon.